Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. I am Bryson Carver. As always, we got a great show for you guys today. All kinds of stuff. NBA All-Star Weekend, or All-Star Sunday, I should say, was yesterday. We had the skills competition, the three-point contest, the All-Star game, and then at halftime, the All-Star game, we had a dunk contest that was one to forget, to say the least. And then, of course, we finished the All-Star game around 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific time. So it was a great all-around night for the NBA. Blake Griffin is almost a New Jersey Net. Blake Griffin's a Brooklyn Net today. I will explain to you why that is a brilliant move by the Nets front office. I'll explain all of that coming up later in the show. But I'm going to do something to start the show, and I don't normally do this on Carving It Up. But I'm gonna do something, and that's lead the show off with a non-sports topic. So I've talked about non-sports topics on this show before, but I rarely lead with it unless it's something that is completely dominating the news cycle. Not just something that's a big story, but something that's just like, wow. So I think it's safe to say that as great as last night's All-Star game was, and I thought it was great, I thought the NBA did a great job. Might have not been the closest game in the world, but I thought the NBA did a great job of putting it together. But during that, 17 million people were watching the Oprah Winfrey, the great Oprah Winfrey, interview Harry and Meghan. And so basically what I did, I watched the All-Star game. I leave. I'm in my basement right now. Watch the All-Star game, go upstairs to my bedroom, and I had it on DVR and I watched it on my phone, start to finish. And so I'm taking notes. I got my notes right here from the whole thing. And I'm sitting there, and 15, 20 minutes into this thing, I'm thinking, wow. So it was worse than we thought. So let me start by saying this. I have two major takeaways. I think that the two major takeaways we all took were these. Number one, I got to give Meghan incredible credit for the courage she showed, the strength she showed, and admitting that I think we all had an idea. I think the general public had an idea that she had to be going through some stuff mentally, right? I mean, the way the British media, and we know, I talk about all the time, I say it half jokingly, half, I'm being real. You tell jokes sometimes, but it's really kind of not a joke. I say all the time, in politics, sports, and entertainment, the American media can drive me a little nuts. But the word I would use to describe the American media is kind of annoying. I'm not just bashing just the media across the board. I'm just saying the collective, for example, in the NBA. Let's just use an example. Giannis is having a very similar season statistically as he did last year. Nobody's talking about Giannis is in the MVP discussion. And I have a saying, when the media gets tired of you, you're not winning an MVP. It's messed up, but sadly, that's the way it is. In the political realm, both sides of the media refuse to call out if their own side does something stupid and refuse to give the other side credit if they do something right. Both sides mess that up bad. And then in entertainment, they like to pick and choose their favorites. But, like I said, that's kind of the case in sports and politics. The British media is a whole different animal. That's a whole different realm in that aspect. I think we can all sit here and say with certainty, and normally, I try to judge it, be a fair judge, and I think I'm being a fair judge, so to speak, in this case. But we can see, we saw the headlines for 3 years, that not only was the British media brutal towards Meghan, but they were incredibly racist. There's not a question about that. Not a question. Okay? So I think we all kind of had an idea. Yeah, that's going to take its toll on somebody, right? Of course. We're all human. You hear that kind of stuff about yourself for, a year, 2 years, however long it was. It's gonna mess with your mentals, as Marshawn Lynch would say. But we did not know until last night that she had actually contemplated suicide. And that she, in her own words, she didn't want to live anymore. In fact, there was a story that she told where her and Harry were supposed to attend an event the next day. The day after she told Harry, I don't want to live anymore. So the next day they attend this event, and Harry says, look, I don't know if you need to go. Like this is not good. You probably need to stay back. And she said, no, this is dark, guys. But she said, no, I need to go with you because I don't, been left alone. I don't know what I'll do. So, and you heard me talk about last summer with Kevin Love, when he won an ESPY, for this. You heard me talk about my man, Dak Prescott, in last September, talking about mental health. There's two things, but like I said, I don't get political on this show, but there's two things. They're both non-political, by the way. There's two things I'm very passionate about and will always be passionate about. And number one, well, I should say three things. Number one is women's rights. Today actually happens to be Women Appreciation Day. So shout out to all the unbelievable women in the world. Number two is racial justice. Very passionate about that. And number three is mental health. How many people have we seen in, celebrities, if you will, have we seen in the past where they got everything? They got the money. They got the beautiful spouse, right? They've got this. They got that. The public loves them, right? But they're not great up there. And if you're not great up there, it doesn't matter. But you can't buy yourself out of that. And so to think, Meghan was going through that is just terrible. And props to her for opening up about it. The second thing, which caught all of us off guard. So of course we all know, her and Harry got pregnant, not too long in, when they were married, not that long after Meghan got pregnant with their now son Archie, right? And there were concerns. We all knew the British media how they were going to play, right? I mean, we know how they work. They're going to be brutal towards the kid. They're going to be brutal towards her. That's what they do. They're not media. They just make up crap. But to think, according to Meghan in this interview with Oprah, that from a family member within that family, they relayed to Harry that that they had concerns about what the baby's skin color would be. And even Oprah was like, what? Like, you crazy? What? And I think we're all just sitting back and like, oh my goodness. We knew, again, I'll reiterate this. We knew how the media was going to take it. But to think that and again, Oprah asked, like, can you tell us who it was? And Meghan said, no, that would be very damaging. So clearly it's somebody prominent. And Lord knows I'm not going to make any, I'm not going to guess. I make predictions of the show about games and what, who goes where. I don't make predictions about people's personal lives. I think that's totally inappropriate. I don't do that. I don't think anybody should, for that matter, in the national media. But just to think about that was actually an actual concern, is if, God forbid, the baby comes out with dark skin, which of course Archie didn't. But even if he did, who cares? Who cares how much melanin Archie has in his skin? Like, why was the fact that was even a concern with somebody in that family is mind-boggling. It's just like, what? I couldn't believe what I was watching. And so, yeah, I mean, those are my two major takeaways. And I think it's fitting at the end of the day. Kind of my bottom line thing from watching that last night is I think it's fitting coming off of Black History Month. Fitting going into, this is, a Women's Appreciation Day is today, March the 8th. And I think it's fitting that the world, not just America, not just Britain, the world got to see a strong Black woman, stand up to the hate, stand up to the criticism, and speak her truth. Just props to her. And so I think at the end of the day, I'm happy to see that. Of course, they announced that they have a little girl on the way. So, we wish them the absolute best with that. But it's good to see that it seemed like they're happy now. They're living, certainly much more comfortably than they did when they were back in the United Kingdom. So, Yeah, I mean, my reaction to that was pretty much the same as everybody else. It was stunning. I'm not one that follows, the the Royals, if you will, day by day by day by day. But certainly we all keep up with it, right? I mean, it's of course it's the monarchy in the United Kingdom, but it's like, whoa. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was watching last night. So moving on from that to the world of sports, we had an All-Star game last night, and Team LeBron, Team Durant. Now, of course, earlier in the day, it was announced, Woj tweeted, I was just constantly getting notifications on my phone as the whole situation was breaking, that Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons would be out due to the fact that their barber had tested positive for COVID. Now, apparently, both Simmons and Embiid tested negative for COVID-19, so that's great. Something else, by the way, just about Embiid and Simmons that I thought was really interesting and I think kind of telling is that apparently, according to reports, they both flew to the All-Star game in separate planes. That I don't know if, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if you want to put in the comments if you guys know, but have we ever had a situation where teammates have made the All-Star game, and I know it's COVID, but they're teammates, where they've flown in separate planes? I've never heard of that before. So, I mean, that was like, okay, that's odd. So, I mean, we'll have to see how that develops. But it seemed like they don't really get along with each other. And, I was on another podcast a few weeks ago, and the Across the Pond sports podcast, and their NBA expert, Ryan, was kind of talking about it. Like, they don't seem like two guys to be, texting each other back and forth and talking about basketball, talking about life. Like, they just don't really seem to get along. But to the All-Star game, that was, if I have one bottom line takeaway from last night, that was the greatest show of not shooting necessarily, but long distance shooting ever in an All-Star game. Guys are taking difficult shots, right? I mean, it's the All-Star game. First three quarters, there's little to no defense. We saw Zion. I felt bad for Zion. He's just kind of throwing the starting lineup for Team Durant. He missed a couple of dunks early in the game. He seemed to kind of settle in the second quarter. But, I mean, you just see, we saw two guys take it over. We saw two guys steal the show. Two guys I freaking love watching. And that's Steph Curry and Damian Lillard. Now, you guys know what I think about the whole situation. I think it's, for the most part, we all kind of share the same opinion. Steph's the greatest shooter ever. And Dame is, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, Dame's a top 10 shooter ever. And Dame is a top 2 or 3 shooter from the distance Steph shoots it. Of course, Steph's the best. Steph's the first guy to pull up from the logo, and if you make it consistently, it's actually a good shot. Steve Kerr encourages Steph, hey, every now and then, just go. If you're feeling it, go and pull up. Terry Stotts in Portland, hey, if you're feeling it, go and pull up. Nate McMillan, the new, or at least the interim head coach with Atlanta now, and it was Lloyd Pierce who, of course, got fired, but now it's Nate McMillan, tells Trae Young, because Trae Young can make those shots, hey, Trae, every now and then, pull up from the Atlanta Hawks logo. That's what, Steph changed the game in aspect, and I'll get into Steph specifically a little later in the show. But I love Giannis. I think Giannis is a jump shot away from being the best player in basketball. You look at his numbers, his PER is always great. He won Defensive Player of the Year last year, which has never been done outside of MJ and Hakeem. That's pretty good company to be in. The greatest player ever, and Hakeem certainly one of the greatest players ever, Hall of Famer, greatest player in the history of the Rockets franchise. And so I always believe Giannis is a jump shot away. If he gets a consistent jumper, he's the best player in basketball. Points, his assist numbers are, he doesn't get enough credit for this. His assist numbers are good. He averages, he'll give you 28, 12, and 5 or 6 a night. That's in a couple of blocks. That's a dang good stat line. Last 2 MVPs have went to him. And I always say, people criticize him for not showing up in the playoffs, and that's absolutely fair. If you're a top 5 player in the league, which Giannis obviously is, you got to show up in the playoffs. But I give him credit for just getting that Bucks team. Because maybe I don't feel like this gets enough attention. That Bucks team, I like Drew Holiday a lot. I think Drew Holiday is one of the most underrated players in the league. That Bucks roster is okay. I mean, it's not, I hate to bang on him again, but Chris Middleton, come on. He was an all-star the last 2 years. Nobody even considered him really as an all-star this year. He's a great shooter, defensive player, and he never shows up in the playoffs. He's a better shooter than Giannis, and I don't trust either of them shooting the basketball in big spots. Drew Holiday is not a good defensive player. He's a great defensive player. Certainly can knock down the jumper. He's effective on the offensive side of the floor. But outside of that, I mean, after that, it's just kind of a bunch of guys on Milwaukee, right? So the fact that Giannis got them to the Eastern Conference Finals, matter of fact, got them 2 wins away from the Eastern Conference Finals, as I got a comment from my man Barry Grant Jr., empty stats. We don't know if he can carry a team to a title, but I respect your... Yeah, but that's the thing is, you could say certainly empty stats, but I guess what I would pose is, if we look at the best teams in basketball, I don't think any of us necessarily consider Milwaukee to be the best. In the last 2 years, he's led them to the best regular season record in basketball. Now, as we all know, Toronto walled up the paint games 3 through 6 in the 2019 Eastern Conference Finals. Of course, we all know Kawhi got going, and they reeled off 4 straight dubs and eliminated the Bucks. Then, of course, we see in 2020, last year in the bubble. First of all, you guys know I never bought in the Bucks as championship contenders last year. I didn't care what anybody said. That was not a championship team. That was a great player leading an average team, fairly deep in the playoffs. And they ran into a better, deeper Miami Heat team led by, of course, Jimmy Butler, who is a top 10 player. And they got exposed. So that's the thing. If they run into Brooklyn, I get it. Brooklyn's not great defensively, and I'm going to get into Blake Griffin later in the show and how I think that signing is actually pretty strong when you really break it down. But I know they don't play great defense, but then again, outside of Giannis, who do you really, really trust with Milwaukee to beat you? I mean, really. So that's the thing. Love Giannis. Giannis was not the MVP last night. You said, come on, he went 16 for 16. No player has ever went perfect from the field in an all-star game with a minimum of 10 attempts. I get that. But 13 uncontested layups and dunks. And then the 3 threes he hit. I'll give him the credit on the one step back 3 he hit from the left corner. That was nice. That was Luka-esque. The step back 3 from the corner. It was nothing but net. It was a great shot by Giannis. But the other 2 threes were bank shots. And Giannis did not call bank. We all know that. I'm a Golden State Warriors fan. Their announcer for their local TV games is Bob Fitzgerald, a great announcer. And his saying, anytime someone banks in a 3, he always says, they missed it so bad they made it. So, I mean, if you get the luck of the draw, you get the luck of the glass, sometimes it's your night. And Giannis was really good last night. He played well. But 13 uncontested layups and dunks. Steph and Dame were shooting literally from half court. I mean, literally from half court. Because you had early in that game, LeBron, of course, LeBron didn't play that many minutes. I get it. He's trying to rest his body. Of course, he took the last game off before the All-Star break against the Sacramento Kings. Lakers narrowly lost that game. He played a few minutes, played hard. I mean, it seemed like he had a good time, but just kind of didn't have that same energy and juice that he's had in past years in the All-Star game. But early in that game, he kicks it out to Steph, and Steph is a couple steps beyond half court. Nothing but net. We saw at the end of the first half that sequence where Steph takes a half-court shot, misses it. Dame takes a half-court shot, misses it. They come back. Dame knocks down a half-court shot. Very next possession, 5, 6, 7 seconds later, Steph comes down, hits a half-court shot. We saw the one where Zach LaVine is actually playing good defense in an All-Star game, especially on Steph Curry. He pokes the ball out. He's sticking with him. So he pokes the ball out. Steph's grabbing it. Couple steps beyond half court. Just turns like, you know what? I'm just gonna let this baby fly and see what happens. And he knocks it down. That's just what he does. I thought Steph should have been the MVP. Now, if Dame would have won it, I would have had no problem whatsoever because Dame did score more points than Steph, shot a better percentage from the field than Steph. But as far as degree of difficulty, Giannis compared to Steph and Dame, it wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. I mean, those guys were, and I've heard some discussion in the media today about, are they going to put a 4-point line? My belief on that is I'm not going to change a rule. It's the same thing, for example, with the New Orleans Saints play, right? In the NFC Championship game, the missed pass interference call, but they changed the rule because of one isolated incident. And it's like you're changing an entire rule about reviewing pass interference just based on one play. One missed call, I get it. But you can't do it. If this had been like a recurring theme, I understand. But for example, it's a short list of guys that you trust. You're not mad if they take a shot a couple steps beyond half court. Of course, we all know it's Steph, it's Dame, it's Trae Young. I know LeBron every now and then will take a couple steps beyond the half court line and knock down a long distance shot. But it's just I wouldn't change the rule because of a few guys. Now, if maybe 5-10 years from now, a lot of guys can knock down that shot, and that wouldn't surprise me if that's the case because of how great these dudes are at their craft. But I don't think that's going to change a rule, certainly for this foreseeable future. But listen, I'll give Team Durant the break in this. KD didn't play because he's still dealing with the hamstring. A hamstring must be worse than we thought, guys, because he's been out, 3 weeks? 3 weeks, something like that. So I think this is a cause for concern for Brooklyn, because we all know James and Kyrie have been playing great together, especially James. James has kind of James Harden's putting his name into the MVP discussion. He was really good last night in the All-Star game, hit 7 threes. But, I would worry about Kevin Durant's hamstring issue. But he didn't play. And then at the last second, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, they're gone. And, poor Zion's thrown into the starting lineup. And so, if Team Durant would have won, I gave him a standing ovation. That'd have been pretty incredible going against, albeit for a few minutes, LeBron, Steph, Giannis, Luka, Jokic. I mean, that's how many MVP candidates are on that team. Like LeBron's an MVP candidate, Jokic is, Dame is, Steph is, Luka is. I mean, that's that LeBron's roster was just stacked. Now, it's at this point in time, I think Embiid is barely the slight front runner over LeBron for MVP. Not by much, though. There's certainly plenty of time, over 30 games to flip that on its head. But of course, he's the front runner for MVP, and he didn't play last night due to the fact that there was, contact tracing. So I thought the NBA did a good job last night. I thought it was very interesting. The skills competition was Luka and Chris Paul got first round buys, I guess, because the NBA figured they're the most skilled guys in the skills competition. And by the way, we had another deja vu with Chris Paul missing a freaking layup in the skills competition, which he did, I think, in 2010, if I remember correctly. It's like, what's up with Chris Paul in skills competitions? But Luka and Chris Paul got first round buys. Both got upset by big men, basically 7-footers. Sabonis is 6'11". Vucevic is every bit of 7 foot, and Sabonis upsets. I think Sabonis upsets CP3. I think, and then Vucevic upset Luka. I might have that backwards, but basically both guys got upset by 6'11", 7-footers. So I thought that was interesting. But again, it goes to show you that the game has just changed so much. Like you can't just have a back to the basket big man. I mean, we all know how dominant Joel is in the paint. Joel Embiid's shooting 42% from 3. So, and he's always been able to make the long range shot, but this year he's shooting over 40% from 3-point range. So you can't just have the days of your Dwight Howards, unless another Shaq comes around, which I think Shaq's a top 10 player. So that's a lot to have to live up to. Unless another Shaq comes around where he's the most dominant player in basketball, your days of the back to the basket center, those are done. Those are done with the shooting that's in the game today, with the 7-footers that can stretch out to the 3-point line and knock down a 3 consistently. The days of the back-to-back center have passed on. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. Now, as far as the dunk contest, it was a dud. I mean, if we're being honest, it was a dud. I thought Obi Toppin should have won. Personally, Anthony Simon did a good job. Simons did a good job, but I thought Obi's 2 dunks in particular were amazing. Where his first dunk, he jumps up, he bounces it between his legs, and finishes it at the end. It was just crazy. And then he dunks over his dad and his teammate Julius Randle, who are every bit of 6'8", 6'9". I mean, he's jumping over 2 guys, basically the same height, around 6'8", 6'9". That's pretty impressive. I thought he should have won, but the dunk contest does need to get more higher profile players. I know a couple weeks back there have been rumors maybe Zion will do it or John Morant might do it. Certainly that would have brought in more hype for the dunk contest. So in the future, I think they need to focus on getting more, even if they're not high-profile players. Aaron Gordon's not, an all-star. He's not a great player, but we all know him like, that dude's a great dunker. Like, you could even pull in a guy that we all know is a notoriously great dunker, so you could do that. But I thought the NBA did a really good job last night. Certainly there have been pushback among the players, chief among them all, LeBron James, when Adam Silver announced, yes, we're going to have this All-Star game in Atlanta. And LeBron went so far as to call it a slap in the face of the players and LeBron certainly, I disagreed with LeBron, but he certainly had a point in that you're getting the best players in the world together. If one of the players get COVID, spreads it, man, NBA is going to be unwatchable for 2 weeks. Because there's talent everywhere, but man, the NBA is not the NBA without stars, just like any league. I mean, it would be kind of difficult to watch. So there's that aspect of it. But before I get to 3-point contest and Steph, I will say mad props to the NBA on putting the emphasis on HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, donating all kinds of money to it, to those schools. And I watched the pregame show. I watched the pregame show till the final buzzer on the All-Star game when Giannis won MVP. It was 6 hours of great TV, but they were great. Chris Paul, especially Chris Paul, LeBron James, in giving these HBCUs a platform, because too often we don't see them get the attention that they deserve. And you see with Chris Paul and the face of ESPN, Stephen A. Smith, producing this documentary about I can't remember which college it is. It's not Winston-Salem State. I can't remember which school it was, but they're doing a documentary highlighting the basketball team there at an HBCU. So I think it was like $3 million in total was donated. So, man, mad props to the NBA, mad props to Adam Silver, who, as we all know, the NBA and the WNBA, by the way, let's give the ladies some love on Women's Appreciation Day. Both of those leagues have done a fantastic job on this social justice initiative. I will agree with, I don't know if he's watching this, but I will agree with my man Ryan Flowers from Clutch Sports Talk. I thought there was one aspect, not to get too deep in this, but I did think there was one aspect one situation where the NBA kind of dropped the ball with this, and that's back in, let's see, this had to have been mid to late August when the whole situation with, oh my gosh, in Kenosha. I'm sorry, I can't remember the man's name who was, of course, we know, shot 7 times, and the NBA boycotted for 2 days. If they wanted to make a bigger statement, I think they should have boycotted a week. That's just, listen, I'm a white guy, but that's my opinion. I thought they should have boycotted longer than they did to make an even bigger statement, and even bigger, like, hey, this is not okay. We got to call this stuff out. But outside of that, the NBA and the WNBA have done better than any other league, especially the NFL, in highlighting, the issues, social justice, injustice, police brutality, and also giving a voice to the HBCU. So I thought the NBA did an amazing job last night, donating all kinds of money to those great colleges. So tip of the cap to them in what they did last night and throughout All-Star Weekend, and what they've done really in the past year since the movement really started. So let me get to Steph. I've said many times on the show, I don't even think it's a hot take at this point. Steph changed the way basketball was played. If you watch, we think about the last decade. The last decade was just, it might have been the best. Maybe it's a little bit recency bias, but it might have been the best single decade in NBA history, because of all the great players and the great finals, the great series we saw, and the parity. People say, Golden State ruined it or the Miami Heat ruined it. We had 7 different champions in the last decade. So there was parity in the last decade. But just watch, for example, the 2013 finals. That was a great series between San Antonio and Miami. The first Spurs Heat series before, 2014 when the Spurs won. But the Heat won in 2013 and went 7 games. We all remember the Ray Allen shot in Game 6. And LeBron, of course, played unbelievable in Game 7. But watch that series. Watch a full game, Game 6, Game 7, whatever. Watch a full game from that series. And 8 years later, 2021, watch a regular season game between 2 average teams. Let's just say the Atlanta Hawks and the Indiana Pacers. Watch a Hawks-Pacers game. I don't know. Steph changed the game. There are, of course, we all know way more threes taken, which, we see the game has changed to dunks, threes. The mid-range shot has turned into a bad shot, which is, listen, to me, in my opinion, I've always believed the worst shot in basketball is the long two. Because, I mean, man, just take a couple steps back and you get an extra point for the make. But the mid-range shot has analytically turned it into a bad shot. A coach would rather you take the corner three or even the deep three from the left wing, even if you're a right-handed shooter. Even on the left wing, which we all know is more difficult to make than the right wing if you're a right-handed shooter. Of course, the other way around if you're a lefty. But they'd rather you take a deep three from the left wing than a mid-range on the right baseline. So, I mean, that's where the game has changed so much. And you see the three-point contest. We heard the commentary on TNT. Reggie Miller came in for Shaq. Reggie, no doubt, one of the 5 greatest shooters of all time. And he tells the story. We all know the story about Larry Bird back in the 80s. I don't know what year it was. I know it was in the 80s when he was in the three-point contest. Larry Bird, in my view, is certainly one of the 5 greatest shooters who ever lived. But Larry Bird goes into the locker room before the three-point contest competitors are supposed to go out. And I won't, repeat the whole sentence of what he said, but he said, I'm paraphrasing, which one of you guys are going to come in second? That was, I mean, we all know Larry was like one of the greatest trash talkers ever, but Larry goes in, he said, which one of y'all bleeps are coming in second? And so it's like, oh, okay. And Larry won in his warm-up. He didn't even take his warm-up, jacket off. He held up the one finger, I guess indicating he was the best shooter in the world at the time. But Reggie Miller was saying, man, Steph Curry should have done that. Because it was a good field. Of course, Devin Booker missing due to his ankle injury. I thought it was going to be a two-man race. I said on Friday, I thought it was going to be a two-man race between Steph and Devin Booker. Of course, Devin Booker couldn't do it due to the ankle injury. Zach LaVine's a great three-point shooter, as is Mike Conley. Gave Steph a real run for his money. I mean, Mike Conley took Steph down to the wire. I thought he was gonna win going into that last rack for Steph Curry, and then what does he do? He hits 4 or 5 shots, including the money ball, which won it for him. Donovan Mitchell's a really good three-point shooter. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum has got a pure-looking jump shot. I love watching Jason Tatum shoot. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's just, the first round, it wasn't even close. You see great shooters, and you see the greatest shooter of all time in Wardell Stephen Curry. I mean, it's just, you see, we got to keep in mind here, these are the best of the best. I understand Joe Harris wasn't there. Joe Harris is shooting over 50% from the three-point line. He won, of course, against Steph back in 2019. But you go back to this year, those are some dang good three-point shooters. And then there's that guy. So for example, when we look at some of the most talented quarterbacks in the game today in the NFL, it's like there's a lot of talented guys, and then there's Pat Mahomes, who just makes throws that you just can't explain. And that's how that's Steph Curry. So of course he scored 30. He got scored a 31 in that opening round of the three-point contest, and then it comes down to the wire. Mike Conley gets to 27, and he had to in order to give Steph a competition. And Steph kind of got off to a little bit of a rough start. He missed 4 of his first 5 shots. I'm thinking, oh, okay, Mike Conley may have this thing. Come to find out, Steph gets to the final rack, right corner, hits one, misses one, and so now he's got to go perfect, hits another one, and hits the money ball at the buzzer to win the three-point contest. It was just crazy to watch. It's just unbelievable. And I already discussed the shots that he hit during the All-Star game. I'll reiterate what I said. Watch a basketball game from 2012, 13, 14, and watch a basketball game in, you can even go so far as 2018, 19, 2021. It doesn't even look like the same sport. LeBron shoots more threes. We're seeing big men. Certainly we've had big men in the past. I don't want to make it sound like is but just a bunch of 7-footers that couldn't make a jumper. There were 7-footers that could shoot. Now more than ever, because they have to. We see Dwight Howard, for example, a great player in Orlando, really effective with the Lakers and with the Rockets. And then Steph comes along, and Dwight Howard is basically irrelevant because Dwight Howard can't shoot. You have to be, You have to be able to shoot nowadays. If to win a championship, you got to have 4, 5, 6 guys, 7 guys on your roster that you can trust to consistently knock down a three-point shot. You have to. Well, it's non-negotiable at this point. Like, you have to be able to shoot the three, not just with analytics, but I mean, when you got guys, especially what makes Steph so difficult is how he's constantly just moving without the basketball. His conditioning is amazing. You know, I always go back to the Kobe quote. I remember a couple years back when James Harden was going on a run similar to what Kobe Bryant did. Remember the year Kobe Bryant won the MVP and was putting up, 50 points and 45, and of course he had the 81-point game that season. And James Harden was going through a similar stretch like that where he's just scoring 35, 40, 32, 51. And Kobe said in an interview, it's great. What he's doing is great. It's impressive, but it's not going to win a championship. You got to play unselfish basketball, move the ball. That's why I love watching the Warriors play. That's why I love watching, even the Spurs at times. I love watching the Jazz. They run this style of offense where if you're just constantly running iso ball, you're doing the other guys a favor. Surely you can burn guys and burn the defender and in Harden's case, hit a step back three or fake it, drive it to the lane, hit one, a left-handed floater or get to the rim, get to the free throw line. But it's not sustainable. And so when, in Steph's case, when you're just constantly moving without the basketball, not only are you going to create open shots for yourself, but because the defense is so focused on Steph, you can get one of your wings can just run a backdoor cut and get in a wide open dunk. So it's just those little things, not just the shooting, but it's the little things that Steph has done to change the game. And I was just thinking about this today. Last thing on Steph before I move on to Blake Griffin is what I think is interesting is once Clay gets back next year, Golden State's going to be a playoff team this year. The 9 seed right now, they're half game back of 8. Of course, as you know, I'm a Warriors fan. I've been very vocal about that before. Go Dubs, Dub Nation. But I predicted before the season after Clay's injury, I thought they were going to be a 6 seed, give someone in the first round, a run for their money, maybe even take them 7 games, but probably not get to the second round. But once Clay gets back next year, Golden State's right back in the championship picture. As long as Clay comes back and he's Klay Thompson, they'll be right back in it. Let's just say, we see the levels. Steph's averaging 30. Steph's numbers now, they're not as impressive, but they're darn similar to the last time he won the MVP, which we all know was the unanimous MVP. He hit 402 threes in the season. He went 50, 40, 90. He led the league in scoring, led the league in steals. Warriors went 73-9 infamously. His numbers now are pretty similar. This season are similar to that season. So he's still the best point guard in basketball without a question. He's still a top 5 player in the game. He's going to be that next year. He's only going to be 34. Let's just say Golden State could reel off, I'll be fair, I won't say 2, 1 championship. Let's say the rest of Steph Curry's career, they win 1 more championship and say he wins another MVP. I think that puts Steph as a top 10 player of all time. 4 championships, 3 MVPs. If that were to happen, that's a top 10 player ever. If you just said, I'm going to give you an NBA player, he changed the way basketball is played. He won 3 MVPs, 1 unanimously, and won 4 titles. You'd say that's one of the greatest players ever. That's a top 10 player. Heck, how many guys have done that? And LeBron's done it. Jordan's done it. Kobe, great as he was, he only won 1 MVP. Now, certainly we argue he should have had more, but facts behind it, he only won 1 MVP. So I'm just saying, if Steph could pull this off, reel off 1 more title, and certainly would help to get the Finals MVP that has eluded him, and then add another regular season MVP, here we go. We've got a real discussion. I've got Steph around 13 or 14 all time. I think he's the second greatest point guard of all time to, of course, the great Magic Johnson. I don't know if he'll ever pass Magic. I got Magic. Magic's my 5th greatest player ever. I've got Jordan, LeBron, Kareem, Kobe, Magic. I think I've got Duncan at 6, if I remember. I think it's Duncan and then Bird, then Wilt, Shaq, Bill Russell. I think that's my top 10. But Steph's around 13 or 14. I always say he's on my Mount Rushmore. Not because he's one of the 4 best players ever, but he's one of the 4 most influential players ever. Jordan, Of course, we all know is the GOAT. Of course, though LeBron is giving him a run. I think if LeBron wins the title this year, that gap really, really tightens. But Jordan's the GOAT, and he made the game more global. He was a global superstar. He's kind of like what we see in soccer, for example, with Ronaldo and Messi, that they're known worldwide. It's increasingly becoming Tom Brady is known worldwide. That was Michael Jordan in the 90s, and Lord knows what would have happened if we had social media, how big he would have been. Then Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was basically Jordan 2.0, like he took all of his moves, right? But he made it into an art form. And listen, Jordan had the killer mentality. I don't care what anybody says. It wasn't like Kobe's killer mentality. The Mamba mentality, right? It's the name for it. But Kobe was just a whole different level of competitive. Whole different level. So he changed the game in that aspect. LeBron, of course, I believe is the second greatest player ever. I don't know how you can make a list of the greatest players ever and it not be in whatever order you prefer, Jordan, LeBron. Those are the two greatest players ever. That they are. But you see, okay, LeBron, second best player ever. Done what he's done. 4 MVPs, 4 titles. Certainly looking to add more. But LeBron made it okay for superstars to form their own teams. So we see he does it with the Heat in 2010, infamously, right? The decision, I'm taking my talents to South Beach. He goes to Miami. Chris Bosh joins him. Of course, D-Wade's already there in his prime. And KD's like, I'll do you one better. I'll join a 73-win team. That was, 1 minute away from winning its second straight championship with the reigning 2-time MVP and Steph Curry. So, KD did one better, join Golden State. And then we see, Kyrie and Durant go to Brooklyn. We see Paul George, Kawhi, they go to the Clippers. LeBron and AD go to the Lakers. So that's how LeBron changed it. Steph changed the way it's played. That's what he did, is more threes. Think about this for a second. Last night, for an all-star game, this is staggering. Last night, there were more threes made than dunks. And we all know through 3 quarters, they don't play defense. So you're going to get a lot of dunks. More threes made than dunks. And again, we saw the threes. Everybody taken from half court or just a couple steps inside of it, with, of course, most notably, Steph and Dame. And Dame's one of my top 5 favorite players in the league. I love watching Damian Lillard. He's cold-blooded, man. Probably the clutchest player in basketball, if we're being honest. But Dame didn't start shooting those shots until Steph started taking and making them. Now, I think Dame's right behind him in that category. Dame wasn't taking those shots until Steph was. Trae Young wouldn't be taking those shots unless Steph was taking them and making them. So that's how he's changed it, and that's why I believe he's on my Mount Rushmore. So listen, it's a joy to watch greatness. Like I said, Golden State's not going anywhere this year as far as being title contenders. I'm still not ruling Steph out of the MVP discussion. If he could maybe go on some kind of super run and maybe get Golden State to like the 5 seed. Remember, Westbrook won as the 6 seed. Remember the Thunder had Westbrook and then kind of a bunch of guys, and they got to the 6th seed in the West. I thought Harden should have won MVP that year, but that's a whole different story for another day. But if Steph get them to the 5 seed in the Western Conference, which with a average at best roster, Draymond's been playing well, and Oubre's been playing decent. But then kind of after that, it's just, Andrew Wiggins and Kent Bazemore and, Kevon Looney, like pretty average roster. If Steph could take them to the 5 seed and put up the numbers that he's been putting up, he should be at least in the top 3 for MVP. But he's changed the game, and it's a pleasure to watch that man operate and shoot the basketball the way he does. So, final topic, Blake Griffin is now a Brooklyn Net. Of course, during the pregame show, I just get the notification on my phone. I'm like, okay, Blake Griffin's a Net. And I thought about this, and I was like, you know what? This actually works. Because first of all, I was dead wrong on the James Harden trade. I made a video, and I'm not taking it down because you know what? If I'm wrong, I got to own up to when I was wrong, because I gloat on this show and I'm right. I got every right to gloat when I'm right, but I also got to point out when I was wrong. I think I'd be cheating you guys if I didn't do that. So that video's still on Instagram. By the way, you can follow me on Instagram. You can see the little thing right there at Carving It Up Podcast. On Twitter right there at Carving It Up Pod. And on Facebook, Bryson Carver. If you search that, you should see the Carving It Up logo. And then on, right here on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, Carving It Up with Bryson Carver. So the video on Instagram, I criticized the James Harden trade. I'm like, James is a great player, but you just gave up your defense, and you gave up a lot of depth. You gave up Jared Allen and Taurean Prince and Karis LeVert, and Spencer Dinwiddie's already out for possibly the season. I was dead wrong on that, of course. James Harden has worked great with Brooklyn. Now, does it get them not to the finals? That's not, they're the favorites to get to the finals in the East. Today, Philly's their biggest threat. Boston can't beat them. Milwaukee can't beat them. Indiana can't beat them. They're the favorites to win the East. Philadelphia is their only competition. Okay? Can it win them the title? So they have Blake Griffin. Now remember, this is not the Blake Griffin of old. This is not Lob City Blake. He hasn't dunked in a game since 2019. So it's been a minute. But he's a much better shooter. He can space the floor. He's still pretty darn athletic. I mean, you don't just totally lose that athleticism, even with the injuries he's dealt with. But the man's averaging 12 points, 5 rebounds a game. That's solid off the bench. He can come off the bench, give you a spark. Again, Dinwiddie's gone for the season with an ACL injury. Karis LeVert, you traded him to Indiana. You traded Taurean Prince and Jared Allen to Cleveland. So, you kind of got no bench right now. And so you had that. And again, everybody in Brooklyn, sources in Brooklyn are saying, no, he's going to play. He's going to play minutes. So you have the 3 superstars. If you could get that extra boost off the bench in Blake Griffin. Now, again, Blake hasn't been great in the playoffs in his career. I think if we think about Clippers in the playoffs, we think about 3-1 chokes in the second round, right? Last year, I don't even want to get into that. That was just a joke. They blew 3 double-digit leads in games 5, 6, and 7 and lost all 3 to the Nuggets. But back in 2015, nobody talks about this. But back in 2015, the Clippers are up 3-2 on the Rockets. They had been up 3-1. Houston won Game 5, okay? But Game 6 is in the Clippers' home arena at the Staples Center. And the Clippers have a 20-point lead or something crazy in the third quarter. And the Rockets proceed to win. I think they won the game by 11. So a 31-point turnaround, basically. A 30-something point turnaround. And James Harden was on the bench most of the time. So you had Jason Terry and Josh Smith out there for Houston. Trevor Ariza beating Lob City, right? Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan. And that loaded Clippers team. And, of course, they wound up losing in Game 7, and that's how their season came to an end. And, so Blake has a history with injuries, we know. Not playing well in the playoffs. But he'll be in a role in Brooklyn where the pressure, there's pressure on him, right? He needs to be a big contributor to a team that can win a championship. But the pressure's on the big 3. It's all on, the most pressure's on KD. Because it's okay, you're away from Golden State now, and you still got 2 superstars with you. You better get it done. Kyrie's had an amazing year this year. He's averaging 27 a game. James Harden has been a triple-double machine since he got to Brooklyn. So the pressure's on those guys. The question with Blake Griffin, can you be a piece, a role player, an important role player on a championship-level team? That's the question. And again, I gave you his numbers, and that, by the way, that's what lousy, the Pistons. They're the worst. They're the worst team in the East. Okay, the Pistons, the Timberwolves are the 2 worst teams in basketball. I think if you're going to watch a Detroit Pistons game, you're either from Detroit or you're watching to see if Jeremy Grant is the most improved player. That's they're irrelevant. They've been irrelevant really since 2004. When they last won the championship, and the Malice at the Palace is really the last time the Pistons as a franchise were relevant. But you give him, listen, this matters, is when you have a talented player, and again, I'm not making Blake Griffin out to be the player that he was 5-6 years ago, the high-flying dunker with Lob City and the Clippers with Chris Paul, because he's not anymore. But he's a better shooter today, no question. He's still a solid athlete. I don't think he's lost too much burst, but you got to remember, if you have a talented player in a bad situation, as he was with Detroit, as Andre Drummond is currently with Cleveland. I think Andre Drummond can be a really key piece to a championship contending team. I've heard the Lakers are interested. I've heard the Celtics could be interested. I think that'd be a good fit. So, you take a player out of a unmotivating situation and put him on a team that's contending for a ring. It's like, hey, it just gives you that extra boost, gives you that extra get up to go to work every day and try to be your best. So I think that matters in this whole situation with the Nets. So I think it's a good signing by Brooklyn. I don't think we know the terms of the deal yet. I certainly wouldn't think it's anything crazy. Probably just a deal that's going to expire after this season, and he'll be a free agent next year. So I think it's a great signing by the Nets. Again, I say that in part because I was dead wrong about the James Harden trade, because as great of a player as Harden is, I didn't think it'd work at all with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, in large part due to Kyrie, because I'm like, in Cleveland with LeBron James, Kyrie didn't like being the second best player to LeBron. So is he going to like being the third best player behind KD and Harden? That could manifest itself in the playoffs. We'll see. But I think it's a good signing by Brooklyn. It gives them much needed depth off the bench, which they needed. And I've talked about this since the Harden trade for the last 2 months. Like, that's what they gave up. And so if they can find some ways via buyouts, via trades, to add some guys to their bench, which they just did yesterday, that makes them that much better. And I wouldn't think Blake's going to come in there with like an ego, like trying to be the best player. He knows who the best players on the team are. He knows he's not as good as the big three in Brooklyn. So that factors in too. Just the self-awareness to know, like, hey, this is their team. I'm just going to be a big part to, making them as successful as I can be, and as successful as the team can be. So I think that factors into it. So I just think all those things, when you combine them, are extremely important when you look at the Brooklyn Nets today. So that being said, that is all the time we have for today's show. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching live on Facebook Live, which I see we're having some issues with Facebook Live. Hopefully we can get those resolved soon. YouTube and Twitter. So hope everybody has a great week. Please join us on Thursday, as always, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, YouTube and Twitter. If you're listening to the podcast, thank you very much. You listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, Anchor, and wherever you listen to your podcast. So hope everybody has a great week. Please continue to stay safe. I see where we're getting, we're nearing, actually the next time we do a show, it'll have been a year to the day, March 11th, since COVID was declared a pandemic here in the United States. And certainly it's been a dark year for so many, but I'm seeing that 2 million people a day are getting vaccinated. So, man, to all y'all out there, if you can get your vaccine, man, please get your vaccine. Like, we all want this sucker to be over. I mean, this thing has just been terrible for a year. So if you can get your vaccine, then, man, get your vaccine. I've read multiple reports saying that they're hoping, like, maybe by the end of May, all adults could get vaccinated, which would be great. So get your vaccine. Hope everybody continues to stay safe. Join us on Thursday. God bless you all.